Just as you would if you were using a traditional blackboard or a whiteboard, when you're using the Lightboard to plan a presentation, it's usually a pretty good idea to kind of template out exactly where you're going to be going, to lay out where you want certain pieces of information or drawings, so that way you don't run out of space on your board halfway through your presentation and realize, I've got to erase something that I wanted to keep. An easy and elegant way of fixing this problem with the Lightboard is to use a black dry erase marker. Now it looks like I'm currently sitting just in front of a clean board, when in actuality I already have two drawings set up. One is this house, the other is this graph. Now with these both set up, I know somewhere in my lecture I need to keep this space of the board clean and this space of the board clean, so that way I've got plenty of room to address those parts of the lesson. And of course, you could fill up this entire board with black markings if you wanted to, little black boxes that you might set aside for student answers or perhaps some important text you need to write. And those can be as simple as just laying a few dots, so that way you know this part of the board is something I need to leave clean. But for something like this house, or probably in your case something much more complex like a diagram, a really intense equation, maybe a really difficult graph, one thing that's very nice about having it already written on the board is I can now just simply trace this instead of having to draw it freehand in front of my students or my audience. So you can see very clearly here, I can just very quickly trace this, and in no time at all I have this house, which if I had to draw freehand would have taken me a lot longer than it just did. And it was very easy to keep talking and presenting through that because I was just simply tracing. That's pretty neat. On this other side over here where we have the graph, of course it's pretty easy to draw an X and Y axis in the moment, but one thing that is pretty neat is if you knew that you had an answer, let's say that you knew that the graph was going to look something like this in the moment, right? And this was the answer to the equation, and you didn't want your students to know that, well, like this, they would be none the wiser. They would simply see a normal X and Y axis, and you could go through your lecture asking, what would the answer to this equation be? What would this graph look like? And then in the moment, you'd be able to easily reveal the answer by just tracing over top of that. Of course, that's maybe a simple example of this, but I think you can understand where some of the power of just simply templating out where you need to have your drawings be. There's a lot of power in that, in planning and making sure you get through your lesson as effortlessly as possible. Again, content is king, and you want to make sure that you are delivering that to your audience with ease.